All right, hey folks, this is Ford Fisher here, aka Moontime Dweller. Gonna give a little bit of a rundown on my red-green Progenitus deck that I've been trying out here. Shout out a few videos tonight. I've been playing with the deck in paper for close to a year, off and on. Been messing with it. I stole it from, the skeleton of it from a deck or a YouTuber named Magic AIDS. Made several decks that have been very good. He's more or less credited with the 5-color humans deck before it became a thing. And so I took the skeleton of this deck. His was mono green with the Progenitus, and I just added the red for Banefire. So it's a ramp deck. It's all green with a couple of red cards that I added. Utopia Sprawl, Overgrowth, Wall of Roots, Arbor Elf helps with anything with Utopia Sprawl and Overgrowth. So you can just get absurd amounts of mana in the first 3 turns or so. You got 8 enablers, is what I call them. Quicksilver Amulet and Dramatic Entrance. Actually 9 now. I added an Elvish Piper in. The original version of this deck, the mono green, had 2 Elvish Pipers. They had 10 enablers. They had 4 of each, and then 2 Pipers. I took out the Pipers eventually, and I put in a Harmonize. And since then, I've gone back. So now we've gone back to 9 enablers. Got a whole bunch of fat creatures that we're bringing in. This was in the original version. It's a great card for the beginning of a hand. You know, you get an extra green, and it's a 6/7 reach. It can, swat a bunch of big fat flying creatures out of the air at instant speed when you're playing in Dramatic Entrance and Amulet and Piper, of course. So that can be a lot of fun. My little addition here is Hornet Queen. It's an easy card to cast with Utopia Sprawls and Overgrowths, Wall Roots, all the ramp that you have. And it's easy to bring in at instant speed. It's 5 creatures. All that have Death Touch and flying. I mean, it's just super annoying. Great card, in my opinion. I have one main deck Woodfall Primus. It'll pop a land. It can destroy something with Utopia Sprawl on it. Like, say if you're playing against green-red Panza, it can destroy a Planeswalker, an enchantment, an artifact, really just anything non-creature, and it's proven to be very useful. It comes back from Wrath of God effects, and it's got Trample on top of it. I mean, it's tough to argue against having at least one of these in the main deck. So, then the main event right here, Progenitus. We sneak in Progenitus with Dramatic Entrance because, lo and behold, one of its 5 colors is green. And we have Dramatic Entrance, or the Quicksilver Amulet, in addition to Dramatic Entrance. You tap 4, bring it into play very easily, along with any of these other fatties. See, we got 4, 5, 8, 12 big fat creatures, 9 enablers, the rest is ramp. And then we have 3 burn spells as the finish. One thing I was having a lot of trouble with when I was playing with this deck, mono green, was control decks. They would just lock you down, and you wouldn't be able to do anything. They'd counter everything you ever do, and you just wouldn't be able to play Magic. And to an extent, they still do that. Jeskai aggro, or Jeskai control, or any kind of white-blue control, or anything like that. They still do lock you down more or less, or like white-blue turns or something like that. It's difficult, but Banefire has made for a much better game sometimes. And there have been matches and games where I've gone Banefire for 11 or 2 Banefires for 10 and won the game. I've done the ideal play in this deck where you go turn 3 and at the end of their turn, you bring in Dramatic Entrance, you bring in Progenitus, you have enough land and elves and whatnot to untap your lands. 4th turn, you can get a Banefire off for 10 if you have the right amount of lands and the overgrowths, all working together. And if not, then you still win. I don't know if the math works out perfectly, but it may be a turn 5 Banefire that you can get 10 off. But regardless, it's a really fun deck. I mean, that's really my main concern with Magic these days. I play Merfolk, I play Burn, I play some other uh, more serious quote unquote decks um, that are in the meta, but I kind of like these decks that are just so far in the fringe that they'll get a win here and there. But the funny thing is, their wins are against Affinity and against humans and against the real heavy hitters. They're just not prepared for this deck. Um, yep, and we'll go through the sideboard here. Bring it up. Got a little bit of a toolbox. 2 relics. I keep the relic of Progenitus in there. A little bit for character because not very many decks in Modern have the actual Progenitus card along with the relic in there. So I thought that was pretty funny. You keep 2 of them in there for decks that really rely on their graveyard, like Living End and Dredge, things like that. I just don't really like bringing it in against like Control, where they have like Snapcaster Mage or something like that, or Jund with Tarmogoyf. If there's only like 4 cards or 8 cards that are graveyard dependent, I'm not really too worried about bringing in the relics. I'd much rather get my cards off. The cards that I'd be taking out of the deck would be more valuable to me than going against their plan. So this is my anti-burn card. In paper, I have Obstinate Baloff. In Magic Online, they're a lot more expensive than I wanted to pay for them. They were something like $3 or $4 each online. These were like a dime, and I thought it was pretty funny because I think at least half the time that I play this, I'll have a 4/4 creature. Even if it is something dumb and not like a big fat creature. But I would think a lot of times I will have 10 life. But even so, 2 mana for 5 life at instant speed against burn. That's kind of a backbreaker sometimes. So I thought that would be a good one. 1 heroic intervention for wrath effects, and just a lot of like Jund kind of decks that have just a lot of targeted removal. And maybe you can save your Elder Scale Worm or like one of your toolbox cards that you're going to see later on here. Got 2 Chameleon Colossuses. They're just protection from black. I've seen some mono black devotion decks, zombie decks running about. This card just runs right over them. It's good for early creature beats if you're running into something like that Possibility Storm deck or something like that where they just don't do anything for 5 turns in a row. You can just get this out and then swing in and crush them for 8 or maybe even 16 on the 5th turn or 4th turn if you can rush them out with elves. You got Creeping Corrosion. This is for affinity, 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 and affinity, and Lantern Control a little bit. So this deck just destroys affinity. Or this card, I mean, not this deck. This card just absolutely wrecks them. And I've lost when I've played it in the game. Granted, I mean, it's not a 10 out of 10 win guaranteed, just, scoop, but it's just amazing. Rurik Thar is one of my toolbox cards. One that I wish that said it was uncounterable, but, that's just me being annoying and obnoxious and wanting more stuff on a card. 6/6 Vigilance Reach has to attack every turn, and whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, they take 6 damage. I mean, pretty bonkers card, if you ask me. You really can't beat that. Especially coming in at instant speed. You bring it in during their upkeep or something when they're not expecting it, and they kind of take 6 damage when they're playing their Living End or their Ancestral Vision or something like that that's going off, or Rift Bolt, or like a Burn deck is very good to bring this in against. Real fun card. Next up is Elder Scale Worm. This is the one I mentioned earlier with Heroic Intervention. It's just a 7/7 for 7 Trampler. You get it deals with the number 7 a lot. It's kind of like Worship in the fact in the instance that if you keep it on the board, you pretty much never die and you stay at 7. pretty simple. I love these core cards that are just, they always had a really funny Hydra or really powerful Worm or both in every core set. And I always really look forward to that green or green and white or something. Every core set back in those days. Oh man, that was fun. Okay, so moving right along, we got Dragon Lord Atarka. This is something that can spread 5 damage to goblins or merfolk or something like that. Or some planeswalkers. I've destroyed 2 planeswalkers by playing it in some games. So it can be very useful. And an 8/8 flying traveler on turn 3 or 4 at the end of their turn. It's pretty difficult to deal with. A lot of fun. And then we just bring in a second Primus here just to interact with planeswalkers and enchantments and lands, whatnot. It's just a great secondary card to have to bring in. So that's my wrap up here of red-green Progenitus. Yes, I pretty much stole the skeleton of it, but I made it my own. Also forgot to mention, got 4 fetch lands here. Only have 2 red sources. Got 1 mountain and 1 stomping ground. Just being a little thrifty here. I see a lot of Field of Ruin and things like that going around. Ghost Quarter still takes them out, but Tectonic Edge and Field of Ruin I see a good bit of. And, of course, Stone Rain hits it and things like that, if I have enchantments on them. But these non-basics, you get hit by Fulminator Mage and things like that. I don't want to deal with that but so much. And there isn't very much red in here. I used to have a little bit more red in here sometimes. And with this red, you can name Utopia Sprawl, you can name red. So it's very easy to, still cast these 2 red creatures, in the sideboard, even though, you may not get the mountain and stomping ground if they have destroyed somehow or removed them from your deck. It's still wholly possible to cast Banefire and the creatures, with Utopia Sprawl. So that's my wrap up of this deck. It's super, super fun. And there are going to be some videos following up with this. Hope you all have fun watching them, and I'll see you later.